All right. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Fire Commissioners for South King Fire to order for October 26th, 2023. All commissioners are present. I'd like to ask Commissioner Vedino to lead us in the pledge.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have 4 sets of minutes to approve. We can approve them all at once, unless anybody has any objections or comments regarding an individual set. Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve the regular meeting minutes from September 26th, special meeting on October 3rd, special meeting on October 12th, and special meeting on October 16th, 2023. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Commissioner comments. Commissioner Berger.
Yes, sir. November 1st, Lisa Deffenbaugh will start as our Deputy Chief of EMS. So
Commissioner Fuller.
Great newspaper, and received it in the mail, and I read 1992. Question I have the ability to respond in fine print, 2 hours and 41 minutes. What does that mean? It's on the back page. It's in the state. Right below population 911 calls, ability to respond.
On the second page.
This is on the second page, yes.
population, ability to respond, hours, minutes, seconds. You're gonna have to do it, Kevin.
All right. What this gets down to in a nutshell, and I actually got this from some of the firefighters the other night also, it's how often crews are in service and they're able to respond to their area and so forth. So what it shows and really backs up, our population numbers are up, our call volumes are up, and our availability of, it has to do with first dues and when people respond. So they kind of line up with each other, right? That we have the same number of crews, we're running more calls, so it has to do with that. And Commissioner, don't feel bad. I had a firefighter reach out to me last night. I actually did a little research on, because there's different ways of FPA and how we respond, and the wording can be a little confusing. So, but in a nutshell, it has to do with how often the first due crews are available and so forth. So what this shows is it backs up the other two.
Okay. I imagine the public would be equally mystified, but also to see a very high number like that may.
And there's a lot of data, has a lot of layers here, right? Particularly the response data related to all the NFPA numbers. There's a lot of layers to it. I think in this, what we're just trying to show is a snapshot of the reality of what we all know inside the fire department.
Crossan, is that downward arrow and indicate that the ability is on a downward trend?
Yes.
Is that good or bad?
It's bad.
Bad.
It's Commissioner Berger, it's a direct correlation to call volume. So if we're going on more calls, we're available. We are committed to calls 2 hours and 41 minutes more than we used to be. And so that relates to unit utilization. And the break point for unit utilization is 80%. If you're not available for calls in your first due area 80% of the time, you're too busy and you need to augment with another resource
That's within a 24-hour period.
within a 24-hour shift. Yes.
I think I understand, but I think the public wouldn't.
I agree. I made a note to fix it for the next one.
If you get calls, that's a good indication that people are
Reading, yeah,
closely.
that's all.
Commissioner Thompson,
No comments at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Bedino,
I was just gonna say, I also.
ditto, I thought it was great too. Got it in the mail 2 or 3 days ago. All right. Are there any public comments?
So, Commissioner Thompson, I think yours is off. It was on.
Sure.
Thank you. I turned Commissioner Fuller's on. I forgot to turn mine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I turned it.
So it's just a quick question on the microphones. You can turn them off and you're not speaking, fine. But if you speak like this, it will only pick up from the face. That way, most of the microphones don't.
All right, so it doesn't look like there's any public comments. Let's go on to, are there any commissioner committee reports?
Mr. Chairman, just to remind all the commissioners that we have a special meeting on Tuesday. Is that correct? We've already received materials. Or 320th property disposition.
Okay, moving right along. 7, strategic bridge plan presentation.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm Seth Rosenblum. I've been a consultant supporting the district in the organizational health assessment and then also in the implementation of the strategic bridge plan. The strategic bridge plan was adopted. I know Summer's bringing up the slides now. Let her load those. Great, thank you. Summer, you can advance to the first slide there.
That is what we have that you're going to be going through.
Correct. Yep, that's right. So it'll be projected on the screen, but then also hard copies been provided. For this presentation, we'll discuss sort of the status of the bridge plan, give a background on its progress. We'll be doing quarterly reports on the implementation of the plan. And so this is our second time coming to the commissioners. We'll also sort of do a status by each of the area. We've got the work group leads who are leading the implementation for different aspects of the plan to be here as well. So we really can have some Q&A and field your questions about the implementation progress of the plan. And then also talk about next steps that will be coming up over the next 90 days. I won't go through, but I did include in this material sort of an appendix of the current org chart, some of the roles and responsibilities across the plan and the accountability model for putting the plan in place. That was covered. It was covered last time. It's actually in the report packet itself. I see Commissioner Berger looking through it. There's an appendix that you'll see here. So in terms of background, this body adopted the strategic plan in February, and implementation began in March. It has 20 strategic objectives, 20 different things to accomplish over a 2-year period. And it draws upon firefighters, civilian staff, people in operations, people from around the district, putting in place several really key important things. One, identifying a funding mechanism to sustain the district for growth into the future, and many strategic objectives about transforming the organization so that it can really best serve the community and its employees. And input for the things that are in the strategic plan came out of the org health assessment that was conducted last year. Implementation began in earnest in March. And with the leadership transition, Chief Van Volkenberg is really committed, continued to commit district resources to the importance of continuing to work to complete, to implement the strategic plan. This is not a piece of shelf art, but really something that's living, that people are working towards in the district. With Chief Van Volkenberg's becoming interim chief, it opened up some leadership over a big aspect of the strategic plan, and Captain Chris Anderson has stepped up and taken on some areas which we'll be talking about that he's been working towards, which has been great. At a very high level, I'd say here's where we are kind of moving into the fourth quarter of the year. Work is underway on almost all of the strategic objectives. A few are complete. Many are moving towards completion by the end of this year and in the first quarter of next year. All of the objectives that were set out for in the plan are still there. Nothing's been changed or deleted, and there hasn't been really any major scope change. It's the right work. This is the right work to be doing. And I just want to commend, there's a lot of people that are doing this work kind of on top of their day jobs, and it's not trivial. This next slide, which you have in front of you, this is the kind of high-level dashboard that first shows the different work group areas around funding, accountability and leadership, planning, and internal communications. And then you can see each row in this chart is a strategic objective, kind of with a very high-level status, when it was initially targeted to be complete, its current forecast, its status, is it being worked on yet? Who is responsible for that particular objective? And they may be someone who can draw from other resources, obviously pull expertise from different sides of the district, but they're really leading the charge on designing and ensuring that these objectives are met. So you can really see this as an effort coming from many, many different people, talent from all sides of the district. What I want to do is dive into each of these work group areas and provide sort of an update, but also give time for Q&A on some of the progress in these areas that's underway. And we've got all of the work group chairs here as well, so they can field your questions and also provide a deeper update on the work that's going on. Funding. Identifying a funding mechanism for the district's future is one of the primary objectives of the entire plan. A lot of work has been in flight to look at peer agencies, to determine and gather the data that will be necessary to analyze what moving away potentially from the current funding mechanisms, the lid lists and levies that are in place, and potentially looking at a fire benefit charge. And a subgroup of some internal stakeholders is being put together, and they're going to have a working session actually with this body to really highlight how this fire benefit charge might function in the district and what it means and how it really functions differently than the maintenance and operation levies that have been in place. And the funding team is anticipating on conducting this workshop, but also really using that workshop to educate and to build alignment and to gain approval to move forward directionally with that funding mechanism by the end of the year. The effort to do this analysis isn't trivial. It requires looking at 45,000 parcels throughout the district and really determining what the costs would be on those parcels. And that in turn determines the formulation used to set funding levels for the district. And that data analysis has begun, just collecting the data, and then there'll be ongoing work to analyze it. And that analysis will be very key because if the district chooses to work towards a fire benefit charge, that information needs to be available in a public consumable form so that people from the community, they're curious, what's it going to mean to move to this different funding mechanism? We'll be able to find out what the cost would be to them. Another really key element is community outreach. And a goal here was not to simply have community outreach just when you've got the handout to raise more money, but begin a community outreach campaign that builds awareness in the services that the fire service provides the community. I know when we last met, some of the community outreach efforts in terms of the video presentation was shared. And now a milestone that's been recently met is the newsletter, which you referred to and went out in snail mail a couple days ago. And again, this doesn't talk about funding changes yet. That's not its purpose. It's really to illustrate to people in the community the services being provided. Is there questions about the funding work or the objectives underway in this area in the strategic plan?
I have a question. Chairman. Joe Ganem, it seems like, to me, it's a chicken and egg problem. You have 45,000 parcels that need to be analyzed, but I see the third bullet down, which would be next year, because obviously that takes some period of time to do. But I see on the third bullet down that you're asking the board to I assume that's a workshop with the board. Is that right? Or is that an internal workshop? The third bullet down under future fund, determining the future funding.
Let me explain a few things and it might answer your question.
So my question is, how do we make a decision if in fact that's expected to go forward with that analysis without having the data? Yeah.
Right. So as this process evolves, we are better understanding what exactly is going to happen come the end of the year when we ask for board direction. So what we're doing is we're in the beginning stages of understanding what it means to have a fire benefit charge and what the differences for the community and for the fire district is between having the fire benefit charge and the maintenance and operations levy, and weighing the pros and cons. And those are the types of things we will be discussing with the board at the end of the year to seek direction. The actual workshops in terms of understanding in a greater detail what the benefit charge means and the formulas and all of that is going to come down the road. The chicken and egg is actually a good example. One thing that we determined in this 45,000 parcel work is this work has to be done regardless of whether or not we succeed in getting the benefit charge. So if the board gives us, based off of our initial recommendations in the fourth quarter of this year, if you give us direction to seek the benefit charge as a funding mechanism in 2024, we will hit the ground running on this body of work. This body of work has to happen regardless of whether or not we actually get it, because we have to be prepared, to Seth's point. And we learned this through our connections at Puget Sound Fire. A lot of behind the scenes work going on. We have a partnership. We signed a contract to utilize the benefit charge tool that Puget Sound has developed, and other agencies are also using that tool. We also have a consultant behind the scenes helping us reach out to other agencies that have been successful in getting the benefit charge and what did they do, what worked, what didn't. All of that behind the scenes work is going on. But if you give us the green light, let's say we recommend moving forward with the benefit charge, and based off of the information we share with you, if the board approves us to move forward, we will start doing that work. Part of that is going through these 45,000 parcels. We have to make sure that the data that we're getting from the county is accurate, because once we start the initiative and the education campaigns around a measure later next year, That tool on the website has to be accurate. And in order for that to work, all of this data has to be sifted through first. So Commissioner Fuller, during the budget presentation a couple of weeks ago, asked about, can we have a workshop so that we better understand this? We're not going to have a workshop at the end of this year. We're going to provide an analysis and the pros and cons, the differences between the M&O and the benefit charge, and seek board direction. You give us that green light, then we get into the workshops and the actual.
At the end of the process, Joe, of analyzing all this data for these 45,000 parcels, would the board be in the position to be able to look at a typical 5,000 square foot residential property, see what the potential benefit charge would be, and compare it to what a typical AV would be, or a tax bill would be
Yes,
for that parcel,
yes.
or some averaging? In other words, enough information to be able to make a decision. Does it seem like it should be put on the ballot or not?
Absolutely. And actually, it's our goal to have that in sort of a summary form when we speak to you at the end of the year. But we won't be able to have the tool ready for you to plug in any parcel and analyze it. But we will have some examples on what that means.
Based on real data for the
Yes.
district?
Yes. We just can't get through 45. In fact, Don's on vacation right now, but he doesn't recall how long it took Puget Sound to go through their parcel data, but we haven't quite figured out how we're going to get that done yet. It's going to be a significant body of work to do. It's very tedious. We've had 2 sessions with Puget Sound and the individual who actually created their tool. And it's just very tedious.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
How many newsletters did we?
71,000, I believe. That's a good question. We had internal conversations about the frequency of doing this, how realistic it was, and I believe our consultant is on the line. It was her recommendation that we try and get back to doing quarterly newsletters. So we will, and we plugged it into the budget for 2024, but we are budgeting to release 4 newsletters a year. And that was some of the feedback through the OHA, and also some of the community feedback that we received, which was we unfortunately fell into the trap of only sending out newsletters when we also had a funding mechanism on the, and we have a lot of positive things going on in the fire district, and it's good to be sharing that throughout and not just every time we need their help. So. Any other questions on the funding work? Okay.
Thanks, Joe. I'll move on to a second area of the strategic bridge plan, which is a set of objectives to increase accountability and to greater support leadership within the district. A key piece of work that's underway now is to establish a mechanism and to train managers in the ability to conduct performance evaluations for all employees in the district. And this is a practice that I think was in place years ago, but had ceased to exist. And something that the organizational health assessment really highlighted was that without regular, consistent performance evaluations, not even in a punitive sense, but in a sense that looks towards merit and upholding standards, it's hard to hold accountability. And so an effort has been underway for the last couple of months to determine a performance evaluation sort of design. It's specific to role. It's being implemented district-wide. And there's training that will begin next month where people will be trained in how to conduct performance evaluations. And then they're going to begin in earnest based on the anniversary date of the employee in the first quarter. They'll actually be launched. That way it's not a big bow wave effect of trying to do everybody all at once, but you collect people that way consistently. So it's not too great a burden on management, but at the same time, it's being performed. A second area that's occurring right now is that a gap that was identified in the OHA was there was not identified paths for training around gaining leadership competencies in certain roles. And so work right now is looking at what are some of the key leadership competencies in roles and where are there training opportunities. They may exist in the community. They may exist actually here within a district that are available to people to sort of build skills. And this is sort of a key thing that you've got career paths here in the district, and that there are leadership practices that can be followed and can be espoused too. And so Captain Anderson has been leading the charge on all of the objectives in this section. And I'll sort of lead it, Captain, if you've got more that you'd like to speak to in these two areas, or if the commissioners have questions about work that's been underway in this aspect of the strategic plan.
Did the work that Chief Cheney, Rick Cheney, do on officer development, does that enter into this or part of this or help?
I'm not sure where he was at before he left with that. If he has something, by all means, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. So we would definitely look at that.
I think his product was Chief Webb, any consortium. It started out as our project, and then it kind of morphed into consortium project. So get a copy.
Question here on, and maybe on item 10, evaluate the ratio of supervisors to firefighters. We doing that evaluation?
Good evening. So we've done some public record requests of all of our neighboring agencies, mainly in the zone, and collecting just shift rosters, matrices of staffing within their 3 platoon or 4 platoon shifts. What came out of the OHA was that there's just not enough time for battalion chiefs mainly to spend individual quality time with all of the members on their shift. Captain Anderson did a great executive summary and survey with the crews as well, which overemphasized that same point, that they're wanting to have more engagement, more interactions, more training, more mentoring from their battalion chiefs. And so this spun out of that, where let's see how other agencies are staffed and reach out to see how they're able to, maintain good training levels and maintain that supervisory through their captains and through their lieutenants and those downward chains of command, just to try to get and accomplish the objective of just either making more positions available in the battalion chief ranks, which is why this is stretched out until the end of 24, because we just want to evaluate the ratio of just how one person in a position of battalion chief can spread throughout an entire shift of workers and be able to provide the quality training and interaction that they're looking for.
Delegation is a key part of that. So it really focusing on the battalion chief only, you really have to look at the how that person is delegating to captains and then captains to lieutenants, and what is moving down and the depth that each of those levels covered. Offhand, I would think that the battalion chief is not the only one to focus on.
Right. We are focusing really district-wide, but it really came out of the the survey that was done particularly for battalion chiefs, and they oversee the lion's share of the staff of the department. And so that's what we were focusing on, but at the same time, we're collecting staffing information just for other divisions too, civilian and other divisions.
Thank you.
If there are not more questions on accountability and leadership, I'll move on to the planning portion. Several objectives in the strategic bridge plan are focused on improving the planning muscles, the planning capability, even a project management discipline within the district. And an area of the strategic plan that's near completion is implementing a district-wide both business and operations planning function. So really having a transparent process by which requests or plans can be gathered, they can be prioritized, what's approved and what's not. I mean, you can't do everything, but what's approved and what's not can be spoken to transparently. That has appropriate oversight. And the process was inaugurated just last month for some budget requests that I believe will be part of the 2024 budget. And it's new. So it's adoption for this plan is just beginning. And Chief Crossan will be able to speak more succinctly about what the process is and has a diagram to share about that.
All right, thank you. I will tell you, thank you to Captain Mertlick and his work in this. You will find a sheet connected, a separate sheet with a flow chart. You will see we did implement this time. There have been little bugs and a couple of things we worked out and a couple of things we've already learned. But in short, I'll walk through what the plan looks like. But here's the goal. What came back in our reports from staff was, and from firefighters and captains in particular, is things get submitted, they go off the budget world, they either happen or they don't, and we never hear anything about it ever again. And that was a big, big concern for them. One of the things that we talked about is that please understand that there are division heads for a reason, and there's a fire chief and there's budget people, and ultimately they still make the ultimate decisions, right? But we wanted to give them a pathway and a voice to submit things. So we did it this year. We did it on paper because there just wasn't time to make a digital version of it. We did get 6 that came back to us, all from lower ranks, captain or below. And it was interesting the things that we got. One thing that we already know, Joe and I had a conversation today about it. Well, I think we need a better definition of what this process is used for and what it's not. Let's say someone wants new air conditioning in their building. There's a process for that. There's a way that works. This process is not intended for that. That is one of the things that we did receive from our firefighters. They thought they needed better. So those things we need to look at. But to go over really quickly, the person submits it. It goes to the planning committee. This time the planning committee was the committee who's working on this, because we just weren't ready to train people how to do it. It is our intentions next year that training committee will be station captains and then some other key people in the organization. And that's twofold. Number one, it lets us start mentoring and developing station captains and having them understand. It's really easy to submit, my station wants this, my station wants that. But sometimes when you see what everyone submits, you understand the bigger picture and go, as important as this is, it's not as important as this item and this item, this item. So that's part of the education we want our station captains to start being involved with. So it goes to the planning committee. The planning committee looks at it, and we just did this last week. The team and I did, and it's basically, and what we look at is this a reasonable request or not? And if it is, it gets recommended to go on to the division lead who oversees that division. If it's not recommended, the person in charge of the committee has to put in writing and reach out to the person who submitted it why it wasn't recommended. So it just doesn't fall off a cliff and we never hear a thing and they don't know, and so forth. If it is recommended, it goes back to the division head. The division head looks at it, and that person still has the choice of whether they recommend or not. Once again, if they, for whatever reason, decide they're not going to recommend it, then that division head has to go back and contact the person and do the full circle, right? I'm not recommending it, here's why, and so forth. If it does get recommended, it goes through the regular budgetary process like everything else. And then ultimately, the fire chief and our finance people and the admin team make decisions, and along with the commissioners, on what we are going to do and aren't going to do. If it's not funded, the one thing that the committee really wanted to see was it still lives on a list. In other words, it made it this far. Everybody says it's a good idea, but the reality is we can't fund everything, right? So it goes on the list. That list is active for a year, and things change sometimes, right? Projects fall off. All of a sudden, we find money for this, we find money for that. So it lives there. At the end of the year, for the next year budget, those things are automatically considered for the next year's budget. So they don't go through the whole process again. However, the division head can decide times have changed, is no longer relevant, whatever reason, they can take it off. Once again, I didn't put it on here, but they would need to contact the person, explain why they're doing what they're doing. If it is funded, then it goes into the budget cycle. There's a planning / funding piece of it, and it becomes part of the budget. So that is the plan in a nutshell. It's what the committee wanted. The one thing that we need to define more is we need to be very straightforward on what this process is used for and what it's not used for. And like a prime example, we have a bigger plan for fire trucks, right, and so forth. But the way it is right now, this doesn't stop a firefighter from saying, we need a new fire truck. And that isn't the intent of this. The intent of this is it's the lower stuff, it's the stuff that matters to our people, and maybe they have firsthand knowledge of it. And it has a formal process that they're guaranteed to get an answer, but it still puts the decision-making in the division heads and the fire chief's hand.
What's a couple examples of the requests that you received?
We received a request for some new suction devices. There's some suction devices our crews carry that there've been opinions about. They're recommending that those get looked at and get replaced for a different style. We got several recommendations related to physical fitness equipment, and so forth. And they're all good, but it comes down to dollars and cents and what our plan is and so forth. I'm trying to remember, there were two physical fitness, the suction unit. I'm drawing a blank on the air conditioning unit for one of our stations. The workout room in particular doesn't stay cold. They want to put a split system in for that. And there's one more I'm drawing a blank on. I'm sorry, but they were reasonable. There wasn't anything there were a couple of things we actually didn't recommend when we broke down the big one related to physical fitness equipment. There are a couple that we thought that really needs to live in the person who oversees that. I mean, it's a great idea, but it's a change in direction for physical fitness. So it really needs to go through that. But that's the type of things we saw. I mean, there was the five of us that met, there was good conversation about everything and what it was. And like I said, the goal is next year is it'll be all the station captains, whoever's leading this environment, and then maybe other couple key members.
Kevin, is there a simple form that any employee in the district use?
Yep.
to identify, describe, and justify the?
So this form went out as just a PDF because our goal is to make this an electronic form on our system, which is part of one of our other goals that I'll get to in a second. But the goal is this would be all electronic, auto routed, and so forth. The other thing we did was when we went through the form out, one of the directions from me was, let's say you're a firefighter. When you send it to me for this process, you're the CC, your officer, your station captain, and your battalion chief. So everybody got to see as well. And they all had an opportunity, if they had the concern, to step in and say something. The reason why I didn't route it from one person to one person to one person is it could get lost, right? Or someone's on vacation, it doesn't happen. So I said, when you do submit it, CC all the people in your chain of command. And then everybody in chain of command knew if you have a disagreement with this or you want to talk about it, please step up and explain why maybe we shouldn't consider this. And to be honest with you, none of the station captains or BCs chose to do that. And every ask we had, all 6 of them, they were reasonable asks. There wasn't anything that was just like, really? I mean, everything, you understood the argument and the point.
Kevin, the other question I had is it clear to everybody in the organization that you don't have to be a request if the captain of logistics has a need? Can that be submitted?
Sure, and that's a great example. I'm glad you brought that up. It went to all personnel, so everyone in the department got the email. It wasn't just operations. But there's a great example. the captain of logistics has his own budget. He works directly. And that's one of the issues that Joe and I were talking about. I think we're gonna have to work that out. Where does this live? What does this work for? Is it appropriate for Captain Thorson to be doing this on something that's just related to some of his decision-making and his budget line items? What this really is stuff that's not, it's not current practice. It's a new item or it's a new thing, you know, and so it needs to go through a more formal process. A lot of stuff the logistics captain does is part of that person's work. But that's, in all honesty, we've already identified that we need there needs to be better guardrails in for what this really is for and what it's not for.
The process looks simple, and probably over time, as people see it in operation, their ideas will get better,
Sure.
or they should get better as they see how it works, and it's not hard to
Yeah.
build something out. And more important, the idea is respected.
Yeah, we have smart people with great ideas, right? And this is just gives them an avenue and then we heard loud and clear in both the all the surveys we've done, everything, that one concern they had was stuff just goes off the budget consideration and it either shows up or it just goes away. So that was a big piece of what the firefighters, the end users and staff won't want to see was that it's okay that people can make decisions and maybe this isn't right for us, but there needs to be communication about that. I'll speak to a couple others just why I have it here. I'll talk. Item 13, it is in progress now. There's a piece of 13 that's related to 14, which is some of the computer work that we're doing. We have hired a consultant for 14, and that's going very well. And that's far. And really, what that gets into is the inner workings, the website, how easy for people to find forms and processes and submit things. So part of 13 is related to that because of that. So that's going on. I believe you guys got an update recently about 15 and completed. I'll just tell you in simple form. I and staff and the labor group, we completed 2 promotional processes this month, both the lieutenant and driver engineer. They are done. They are in the review period. We are getting ready to send a questionnaire out to all members who took it, were involved in evaluating or are involved in developing it, so we can get feedback. The verbal feedback has been very good, but I went in writing, so we can do it. But it is complete, and I believe we have a model that we all can support. And then the last one, 16, we just started working on that. You can tell by the title of it. We need some other things in place, but President Baston and I have just started working on that. So that's my area. So unless anybody has any other questions about that.
I do have one more. Sorry to belabor the
Sure.
point, but is it clear in connection with, I guess this is item 13, submitting an item for budget consideration. Is it clear that it's more than just a capital item? Could it be materials, supplies, services as well?
I think so.
Or is
because-
it only capital items?
Well, it was capital, but some of them are small. Like we had one adding, and it actually lined up. We had one large one presented for workout equipment and included all the stations. And one of the items in there was to install mirrors on the walls in all the stations. One of them has it currently, others don't. But yet we had a station captain at one of the stations that submitted the same thing. So I mean, that's exactly, it was $1,100 just to that one station. The reality is, you know how that goes. If we do one station, we're likely to have to do another. So it's going to be quite more than that. But that's a great point, Commissioner. I believe we need to make that more clear that it could be a service, it could be an idea, right? It's really anything that has a budget or operational impact. But that gets back to what are the guardrails, what's this used for, and understand it's bigger than just stuff. It could be, the same as far as services or doing something different.
You know, like an operations procedure or
Sure.
a different way of doing things. It may or may not mean capital, but it may mean manpower.
Sure. And one thing we have to be careful, we have other good work groups, right? We currently have an engine spec committee who's doing great work. So we don't want to step on each other's toes. So that's another piece that we have to look at is there are other processes in place. And so.
Well, it sounds like the guardrail should be something that would have a budget impact.
Yes.
But that's not just capital items.
Right.
Materials, supplies, or services.
Yes.
Thank you. If there are no more questions on planning, the fourth large area of the strategic bridge plan focuses on internal communications, sort of communications within and across the district. A realization that I think was surfaced by the organizational health assessment was there's not even sort of standards or best practices or guidelines for communicating internally. And thus there's not sort of a community of practice about keeping those guidelines or best practices in place. And so a lot of work is coming together right now to do both those things, to establish some governance for internal communications. And then once that's in place, to have a working group of department heads that meets quarterly to keep those best practices in place, to put them into action. And Hope Bourne has been leading the effort on establishing this governance mechanism, and she's going to speak to it.
Hello. Dawn is on vacation, but I wrote this policy, so I'm probably still the better person to talk about it. So I know we've discussed before making sure that everyone in the organization has tools to communicate effectively and kind of evening out that playing field. And part of that was the move to 365 to give everyone access to initiate Teams calls and meetings, to access information from anywhere. And that has been progressing very well. During work groups, we've made them virtual and in person so we can have maximum participation. Overall, the idea has been to lower barriers to participation and communication. Part of our work is overlapping with planning committee to put our SharePoint intranet online. That's progressing really well. The idea is to have only living documents there. So no archival resources, only the current resources be present there. And then anything from the archive will store on premise. With that will be forms that are all automated, so notifications happen immediately and to the correct people. And resource information can be available to all personnel no matter where they are. That means they can access resources on a call, during a deployment, working from home, lowering the bar. So with that in mind, now that the tools are in place, we really needed guidance on how and when to use them. This policy is currently being reviewed by the work group. The next time we meet, we'll discuss any changes they want to put into it. So that's why you don't have a copy of it yet. But I'll give you a broad overview. Basically, it means communicate early and communicate often. So if you have information that would be beneficial for other people to have, make sure you communicate that information and then follow up to make sure they've received it. Oftentimes, what I've experienced is emails go out and then that's the end of it, and we just assume people read them, and they often have not, and they're taken unawares. Or we use a means of communication, let's say email, one time for a purpose, but then the next time we put it on a first arriving message board. So people don't even know where to look for certain information. So with that in mind, I created a matrix that has all the different methods of communication available to us and the appropriate situation in which to use it, so all of us can be on the same page. Email is not for an immediate response. That would be a phone call. Teams is for something not as urgent, but an instant message type of a thing. We've done webinars with Chief Van Volkenberg that have been very successful in helping him be accessible to a wide range of our personnel in a way that's very tangible because everyone has access to them now. Guidance for how to use the SharePoint Online site, the public website. I won't go into all the details. The second part of the policy is a list of expectations and responsibilities. And there's two sections of it. The first is for all employees, what to expect to receive for communication and what your responsibility is to communicate. And the second is for those of us in positions of leadership and what we are expected to communicate to our staff and what we are responsible for communicating with them. What we heard during the work group was communication from leadership to staff can often be inconsistent depending on the person. People sometimes weren't consulted on decisions that impacted them or were their areas of specialty. So this goes into that and clearly lays out how to communicate, when to communicate, and what to expect from the communication. That's everything.
That's a great overview, Hope. Is that a policy that once it's in final commissioners, just for our
Absolutely. Because I gave it in our last work group meeting to the entire work group to review and provide feedback, I didn't want to unleash it on anyone because it might change. But I'm more than happy, it's 4 pages. I'm more than happy to send it to you once it's been approved, gone through the work group, gone through HR and through Executive Director Ganem and Chief Van Volkenberg.
The definition of information gets pretty broad. It can be high priority, or it can be FYI, or it can just be, I read this or I saw this. I just want to let you know that it's being done in New York or something like that. Are you going to try to prioritize that, or how are you going to?
I'll read to you the introductory sentence to this, and it could change. But it says, we understand that we are constantly communicating with every action we take and every way we engage with each other. By creating guidelines and principles for internal communication, we hope to create an environment that is open and transparent, fostering interdivisional cooperation and function, achieve and maintain reliability and integrity of information, maintain compliance with South King Fire's policies, plans, procedures, as well as all applicable laws and regulations, and ensure established objectives and goals of the organization's operations and programs are met. If you want more distilled, there is that matrix where for example, in-person and virtual meetings, this is appropriate for real-time in-person collaboration or dissemination of information. Consider recording if content should be available to those not in attendance. All meetings should have an agenda at scheduling time. So it does really go all the way down. We're talking about our message boards, which are first arriving. Those should be used for low priority information sharing. So it details all of that.
It's going to take a while for the organization to learn to do these things, right? In several of these.
Yes.
Because they've never done it before, and they need to learn how to do it from planning all the way through.
Sean Nichols' piece to establish kind of a work group of leaders who evaluate adherence to this policy. We've discussed it, and part of the intent behind that is not just to see if things are being adopted and enforced, but also to see if the policy is effective or if it needs to pivot. It's not meant to be an edict, an end-all be-all. We do want to conform to what's best for the organization, and I think having that quarterly touchstone with admin and operations there is going to be really important to judge adoption and how we need to change either the way that we are trying to have people follow these rules or change the rules themselves to mirror more what's working for us.
You know, one of the things that we get occasionally is the announcements about something. And a lot of times it's missing the who, what, why, where, when, and how. So you're left kind of hanging, and that creates phone calls or other emails or whatever. So yeah, having a standardized format and sure that whoever reviews that before it's distributed uses the same format and make sure all the blanks are filled. Good.
A really important part is creating an expectation and then fulfilling it. So if I, as an employee, know every time there's going to be a technical outage, I can expect an email and the first arriving boards to tell me. I'm expecting that information when I look at those boards. So that's our hope, is to create the people who are making the communication and expectations so they already know how to communicate, but also people who are receiving it to understand where they should be looking to get what they need.
Our communications to and from the Board of Commissioners, part of what you're looking at?
Yes, and if you have feedback on how that could be better, I definitely would like to take that into consideration. There are some things on here, but it's mostly just internal to employees, but I would really love any feedback you had.
I don't see, maybe he's there, but I don't see Battalion Chief Barrett up on the list, but I'm curious, since Objective 19 is complete, what was the work product out of that process?
I can speak to that. We work together. He standardized the rotational highlights, which I think you guys are now getting. And actually, some really great feedback. Chief Van Bolkenberg asked me to convene an ESO work group with operations. So we've been meeting and it's been really successful. And one of the suggestions from that group was to quarterly amend just a paragraph of seasonal instructions that are easy to forget, like when we're in burn ban season or whatever it would be, to those rotational highlights, because now that they've been standardized and valuable to operations, they're being read. And I thought that was kind of a really nice confirmation that the work that BC Barrett has put into place is paying off. Just the fact that operational members identified that as an excellent communication source.
So all the battalion chiefs are now using that standardized
Yes.
format to do
Yes. And there's room in there for individuality, of course, but it's what we were talking about earlier, where an expectation has been created of what kind of information is going to come out. And because that's been reliable, people are using it. They go there looking for that, and it's there.
As I recall, in the evaluation, it was pretty pointed at the battalion chiefs that they weren't communicating. I think that this is a very specific piece of work aimed at them and get your act together.
I think it's been received well. I try to get out to the stations every month and talk to operations mostly about my piece, but I've gathered feedback that they're looking to those rotational highlights.
Yeah, I find them informative.
Thank you, Hope. If there's any more questions on internal communications. You know, the last point I have here really is a little bit of a look ahead over the next 90 days. There'll be a lot of activity on the strategic plan. First and foremost, there's work going on in all these areas. And so there are teams that are assembled, meeting. We're tracking the progress of that work. Joe mentioned many of the funding activities that will be underway, and that there'll be more work with this body of the commissioners to determine a direction forward on a funding mechanism that then would go out to the community next year. We sort of the folks that work on the strategic plan, there's work group meetings happening, and then we formally meet every 2 months and disposition status of that work. And then there's a steering team made up of many of the people here that meet as well to sort of monitor progress. And another really big piece that's going to come together is the training for the personnel evaluations, which were mentioned earlier during this session. That's going to start, I believe, next week. It's going to be in November. And then the employee evaluations will be beginning in earnest right at the beginning of the year. So a lot of work underway. Is there any further questions on the strategic bridge plan?
Our plan, this was a bridge plan, a bridge to a strategic plan. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. This was a 2-year bridge plan for then what would be a larger strategic planning process that would be conducted in.
Okay.
You know what we're getting funded for. The whole plan.
Yes, that was great.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Chairman Gates, if I may.
Strategic plan, perhaps unlike parts of the last one, that the district did isn't sitting on the shelf. It sounds like it's a really active, organic moving process. Work ethic, ongoing. Very, very helpful.
Great job by everybody.
Yep.
I mean, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, one person can't put the puzzle together. It takes a really, really long time. By breaking it up into smaller groups, it's happening. Been long time in coming, but we've got more people on staff now that can help guide some of this and get it implemented. Congratulations, good job.
Chairman Gates, if I might, before we leave the subject of the bridge plan. You know, one of the things we heard from the commissioners very loud and clear was this was important and we wanted to see this continue to move forward. And I'm very impressed with the amount of work and the attention to detail the group has gotten completed in all phases. And there's a few folks that, while everybody has worked very hard, there's a few folks that have really contributed to keeping things on track. And Captain Anderson, Hope, Seth, Nikki, Lane, Sean O'Donnell, all deserve a little bit of an extra pat on the back for some of the work they've done to contribute to keeping the pace forward. As Seth said, staff we're committed to keeping this going and we're embracing the work, but it does come at the cost of being additional work to some of the things we're working on. I've been very impressed at the commitment and the energy folks have put into the bridge plan. So we should be proud of our staff.
Good
Agreed.
job. Yep. Okay. Moving on, administrative team report.
You received the reports in your packet, so if there's any questions or any need for additional clarification, we'd be happy to entertain.
There are a lot of mentions of hiring consultants. I've been a consultant for the last, 30 years or so. And sometimes consultants are people you hand your watch to and they tell you what time it is. But you've been obviously looking at the talents that you need and the extra horsepower that you need to accomplish these things. And in a short period of time, that could be very important. There's some people out there really smart and know what can add to it. I would caution that you don't put them in a position that they're employees, that they are they're providing you with assistance and guidance, and you don't keep them around so long that they have an office.
Agreed. I think we've done a pretty good job of putting some fences around expectations. And much like we talked about a couple of meetings ago, as the body of work is completed, letting consultants move on and transferring people to other responsibilities within the bridge plan will be the plan moving forward.
Good.
Don't take any of that personally.
He's probably heard it many times before.
Secret to a long life is knowing
By the way, can I have my watch?
One of the cities I managed, it became a joke with the mayor and council members. They referred to the C word. And that was consultant. They didn't even say the word consultant because they saw too many consultants. So unfortunately it became somewhat important. So it became the C word.
So Seth, is your theme song, Don't Fence Me In? Chief, can you give a little update on our vehicle deliveries? Or rescue rig and?
Of course. So the engine that went back to Spartan for repair service, is back. Fleet's in the process of giving it the once over, putting equipment back on it, getting it ready to go back in service. I believe we're waiting on some ladders to come back. Once the ladders are here, the unit will be ready to go back in service. So it will return to its home station, which will be very nice. So we'll have another surplus engine we'll have another reserve engine. So that will help the fleet and it will help us to not be having to defer maintenance on other apparatus or having to do without, so to speak. The heavy rescue is here or on its way. Yeah, it's still in Hillsborough, so it will soon be transferred to us. Firefighter McKinney will be transferring to days, and he'll be working with Fleet on equipment location and mounting equipment and getting the apparatus ready to be put in service. And then from that, doing driver's training, making sure we do an effective driver's training program. It's a large apparatus. It's a tandem axle vehicle. So making sure we do an adequate driver operators training program. And it has some equipment on it. It has a very large winch on the front with some extra block and tackle that we want to make sure we do some really comprehensive training on, so we keep everybody safe. Everybody knows the expectations. They've had an opportunity to train on it. They're competent. So all of that is ongoing. Subsequent to that, there had been talk about, as soon as the rescue was in service, we were going to put the rescue at Station 4 and we were going to staff it. And we were going to put the ladder truck at Station 2 and we were going to staff the ladder truck. To accomplish that, we dropped 2 aid cars. So when 80% of what we do is EMS, it didn't feel like that was a great idea to take 2 of our primary aid cars out of service, put 2 larger apparatus in service that would then still have to go on those aid calls. So we've instituted a bit of a pause. I've asked Captain Anderson again and Chief Smith to form a working group. We're going to look at apparatus placement, apparatus usage, training requirements, criteria to be qualified on the heavy rescue, training criteria to be qualified on the truck. Should we split them? Should we leave them together? Staffing models, what should they look like? And it gives us an opportunity to get some of our folks back from the academy, gives us an opportunity to augment staffing a little bit. And it gives us an opportunity to come out with a well thought out plan. So in the meantime, the heavy rescue, when it goes in service, will live at Station 64, just like the rescue does now. It'll be cross-staffed with the ladder truck, just like it is now. But we need to be pretty intentional about how we put that apparatus in service, because we cannot drop aid cars out of our system for 2 very specialized units that are then going to have to assume those aid calls. Those are large apparatus. They're expensive to operate. They're unique. If you have it, when you need it, you want it to be in service, not on an aid call. So we're going to formulate a more comprehensive plan before we pull the trigger on exactly where they go and how they go in service.
Looking at the list of calls, do aid cars respond by themselves very often? It always seems like there's an aid call, there's a aid and an engine. Is that true, or is that just a perception I'm getting from reading the log?
It's probably a little bit of everything. It's probably partially true. And the thing to look at would be order of arrival. Did the engine get there first and then ask for the aid car? Because sometimes that happens because they need either equipment or they want the aid car to transport, or they want the aid car. They want something specific off the aid car. A lot of times it can be the aid car arrives first and then they call for the engine because they need more firefighters. They need more help. So it can end up being 2 units regular kind of often, but usually it's based on the nature of the call.
Sometimes it's pretty fuzzy what that call is.
Yeah, it's very often what they call 911 for and what they report and gets dispatched and what the actual call is are dramatically different. That happens quite often.
As our chair knows, excuse me, staff, but I have another commission meeting that I need to get to, special meeting. Thank you very much.
You ready to go to the October budget?
Okay, before, just real quick, we did push out. We did push out some of the budget meetings that were coming up. We had a finance and audit committee meeting scheduled for Halloween. Due to the property stuff going on, I was asked if we could push it out, and we're in a good spot budget wise. So we did push it out a week. So we're going to have a finance and audit committee meeting. I believe it's the 7th, and then a workshop with the board, open public meeting on the 14th. And then that'll give us about a 2-week period before we go into the Thanksgiving holiday and budget adoption right after Thanksgiving. So everything is lining up well on the budget front. Since doing some of the initial presentations and discussions, I had not received an update from the county on AVs, even though I had asked for them. And I actually got a little concerned that our designee up at the county maybe was out on leave or such. But after we met on the TIF yesterday, I talked to the finance director of City of Federal Way, and he goes, "Oh no, I'm getting mine from her every week." So I called her this morning, and within a few minutes, I had an updated projection. So it improved slightly, but we're still down in our jurisdiction over $1 billion in AV. So we still have some of the concerns that we had originally. Was hopeful that during this period of no projections that there was some improvement, but it was very slight. Anyway, but we're looking forward to presenting the budget to you in November. With that said, we are sitting pretty well from a budget perspective. We're at 81 and 88/100%, which puts us 1 and 45/100% under budget for the year. So we're still tracking very well. And with that, I'll pass it to Summer for the, oh, she has her own mic. Go ahead.
Okay. Mid-month utilities totaling $53,290.81. Accounts payable warrants totaling $1,196,551.29. Payroll direct deposit for 185 individuals totaling $1,497,599.48. EFTPS payroll taxes totaling $344,532.44. Medical claims processed as of October 24th, 2023, totaling $309,457.77, bringing our grand total to $3,401,431.79.
Okay, can I have a motion and a second to approve the vouchers?
I move we approve the vouchers.
Right. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor of approving the vouchers, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Any last minute comments on anything before we adjourn? We are adjourned. Thank you.